My name is Hadass Levine, and I am the Director of Program and Events at the Birmingham Jewish Federation. And I want to welcome everyone to this extraordinary gathering where we have the incredible privilege of hosting Mr. Leonard Held. It is my distinct honor to introduce a man whose life journey spans over a century. A man who not only witnessed history, a 101-year-old Jewish war veteran. Now, you might be wondering, what common ground do I share with someone who has lived through so many decades? Surprisingly, quite a bit. To start with, both Mr. Held and I share an unwavering passion for Alabama football. Roll Tide. Over the years, I had the privilege to visit his house and cheer for our team. It's always a blast, and for some reason, he doesn't mind my enthusiastic screams and even the occasional curse when the referees mess up. Our shared enthusiasm for the game has been a source of joy, especially when we win. But it's not just our love for football that unites us. We both hold a special place in our hearts for his daughter, Karen, and my friend. Karen, as many of you know, is very shy. Regardless of her meek personality and demeanor, Karen plays an essential role in both of our lives, and we both appreciate in our recipients of her big and loving heart. Today, Karen will ask her father questions that will guide us through the incredible stories of his life. So, without further ado, let us extend a warm welcome to Mr. Leonard Held, a living testament to courage, resilience, and a true mensch.
The first thing that I'm going to have to tell you, I thought when I was told about this that I would have to introduce myself when I started talking. But I see there are more people here that I know and I don't know, and it's a definite honor that I've been asked to discuss these things. The first thing I want to do is to tell you that I'm dedicating this speech to Sissy, who always wanted me to be dressed up when we were going anywhere. So here I am, and I hope you'll enjoy what I have to say.
I'm going to start for just a minute. We're going to go back and forth. Dad was born in Talladega, September 8th, 1922. And he began University of Alabama in 1939 at 16 years old, right?
Yeah. 17.
17. He had just turned 17. And so Dad, it was December 7th, 1941, and Pearl Harbor struck. Can you start there and tell us what you were doing when the bomb dropped on Pearl Harbor?
Well, it was a Sunday, of course. I had been at the library at the school doing some work. When I got through, I started down the steps going back to the fraternity house. As I was going down, Alan Sugarman was coming in. He asked me if I'd heard the news, and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. and he told me about Pearl Harbor. And we discussed it for a while. And I guess that was the beginning of the situation that I knew and developed from then on.
And so then people were being drafted into the military. Dad's father, my grandfather, Harry Held, was able to be in contact with people that said that he could finish college another year and a half before he would be drafted into the military. So then, Dad, you graduated in August 1943, and you began your basic training a month later when you were 21 years old.
Well, when I was inducted, I had to go to Fort McClellan in Anniston, where I was sworn in, and shortly after that, we were on a troop train going to Miami to be inducted. That's why I was inducted into the Army. I guess.
Where did the soldiers live in Miami?
Well, the soldiers lived in the city of Miami, actually, had been taken over by the Army, and that's where we were living. I was put in the Jefferson Hotel, which was on Jefferson Avenue, that started at the shoreline and backed up to the main source of transportation in Miami. From there, we did exercises, learned about the rifle, learned to take them apart, put them together, clean them, shoot them, and then I had a little experience that I think is interesting. I'm going to call it the inch process.
The 1 inch program.
The 1 inch program, but what happened was all the soldiers who were involved in that thing were told to lay on their stomach. You put your rifle in your left arm and in your right arm. When you were laying down, they told you you were going to do that to the end of the process, which, if I remember correctly, lasted about 30 minutes. And there were about 30 units, 30 people who made up the whole deal, showing you this. When it started, you push the rifle up this way. The next thing you did was catch up with it, and you went down the entire 100 yards, pushing left, pulling up right, and you did not raise your head at all. You had to keep looking down until you got to the end of the process. The reason was that there were machine guns sitting, shooting 1 inch over your head. That's the reason it was the inch process. But if you didn't keep your head down, you were a dead duck, because those machine guns were going the whole time you were traveling. So.
Wait, my turn now.
So here I am. I kept my head
Kept
down.
your head down, thank you. So training in the United States was about a year's worth. You were in Miami about 6 months, and then you were sent to Olean, New York, to St. Bonaventure for training. And in St. Bonaventure, the Rutgers University where you were was run by the nuns.
Yes.
And tell us in a sentence or two, what did the nuns do for you?
Well, the nuns did everything. They taught school, they cleaned up, they cooked, they did the laundry, they had classes, and we were there for about 6 months when you didn't have a class in Olean at St. Bonaventure. Excuse me.
He had weekends off. So one weekend, Dad
Excuse me, honey.
What, Dad?
I wanted Dad that in where St. Bonaventure was, there wasn't a single unmarried man there. They were all in the war. And the ladies there were happy as they could be when the men came, and the men was happy as the ladies were. They all had something to do, and they took advantage of it. Okay, honey.
Okay, so on the weekends, there was free time on the weekends, and Dad, you were able, one weekend, you said you would go to Washington, D.C. and visit Ivan Black from Birmingham. Another weekend, you would go to New York and visit your Aunt Jean and Uncle Manuel, held living in New York.
Well, actually, that was the part when I was in Olean of what was started by the Army and called the ASTP, which was the Advanced Student Training Program. When you were in that program, you went to school, you took lessons, you were taught, you did your Army stuff, and it was like a vacation for me because I had just graduated from college, and they were teaching second year math and stuff like that. So what Sis is talking about is after St. Louis Obispo, I was transferred to Rutgers University.
Wait a minute, we're not there yet. We hadn't gone to Obispo yet. You went from Miami, New York to Olean, and then you went out west.
No. It was a little later, but
San Luis Obispo's in California.
when I left Olean, I was stationed at Rutgers University, and I was still, were free to do what you needed to do. You took your lessons, your time was your own. And then we were on the train track. So one week I would go to Brooklyn to see my aunt and uncle. The next week I would go to Washington to see my friend Ivan Black. We had always been friends since we knew each other, and he was stationed there. I'd go there and stay with him, and we had a lot of fun.
That was great.
Okay.
Well, tell them quickly, when you were in New York for a weekend and you had your uniform on and wanted to go in to see a show, what would the man at the door do?
Well, generally, if you're walking through the stage show territory. If the one of the attendants saw you, he would say, "Sir, would you like to see the show? We have an extra seat here, and I'll be glad to have you come in." Naturally, I would do what I could, but sometime you had to stand up. Sometime you could have a seat, but it was always free. Another thing in that conjunction is I had stayed at the Astor Hotel before, so one day when I had nothing to do, I walked to the Astor, and the doorman there asked me if he could help me. I told him I was just coming up to see what was going on. He said, "Well, come with me." He set me up in the front. I was as close as from me to this first table. And he said, "You just enjoy what's going on." What was going on was Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Dorsey and Benny Goodman. And I did that for a long time. I tell you, it was things that I would never forget when that happened. It was a good experience being at Rutgers University for me.
Well, and they treated the soldiers wonderfully when you would go in town. So from there, Dad, you went to Camp Carson in Colorado Springs, which is also, before you went to Europe, I think that's where you were trained as a switchboard operator. And it is also where the Timberwolf Division, your big division, was one of their training grounds. So from Camp Carson, that you would, what?
Well, the commanding officer of the 104th Infantry Division was General Terry Allen, and he was considered to be probably the best trained and best operating commanding general in the entire United States Army. The Timberwolves were originated in Oregon, and that was the head of the Timberwolf. So he took it upon himself to name the Timberwolf the mascot of the 104th Infantry Division. And one of the things he did was to make a motto with the Timberwolf and say that nothing in hell can stop the Timberwolf. And after the war was over and everything settled, and he came back with and said, "And now I want to tell you that the war has been won. We fought, we won the war, and nothing in hell could stop the Timberwolf." So that was the unit, the Army section of the Army that I was in, was the 104th Division.
Yep.
Now, what did you ask me?
Nothing yet. But this is, I will tell you, Dad, this book, The Timberwolf Tracks, was published in 1946, all about your unit, with a introduction by General Allen and also a letter from the Secretary of Defense commending all of you. You landed in Europe with your division September 7th, the day 1944, the day before you turned 22 years old. You landed in France near Le Havre, and from there this was also during the time of the Battle of the Bulge during these next 9 months. And that's,
No, it's not.
no, it's not. It was close to the time of the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and you traveled from your station in France through to Belgium, to Holland, and then to Germany. Is that right?
Yes.
And would you tell us, please, let's start, you and your unit entered a town, a war-torn town. Would you talk about that for a moment, please?
What this is talking about is my unit, where they were located, had been through towns that had already been defeated, and we would look in the buildings and walk around. While we were doing that, we heard a sound that we were told that it came from the 88, I think it was 88 cannon, that was supposed to be the most dangerous cannon that the Germans had. And they said if you could hear it, you were in bad trouble. Well, my unit at that time was stationed just out of one of those cities that we were looking at. And my group had bunk beds and other situations that we were sleeping in. My situation, I was on the third deck.
Did you hear the cannons?
Well, if you were on the streets, you could hear some of it, but I was sleeping in the third deck of the bunk bed. So while I was in the streets, we could hear the cannon shooting. Well, it was dangerous to stay there. If you heard it, you was in bad trouble, is what they said. But when I got through with that, I got in bed. I was on the third level of the bunk bed. And while I was there, I went to sleep for 3 days. I never got up, never thought about anything, didn't do anything. The result was that I had gotten to the point that I was worried about whether I would live or whether I would die. And I did that thinking till it just wore me out. When I made that decision, I decided if I lived, I would live. If I didn't, I didn't. And that's something that you had to do to make it through the war. If you sat there and worried about that, you wasn't worth anything. So fortunately, I was able to do it that way, and here I am talking to you. But that because of that, though, I was able to do my job and do what I was supposed to.
So, as a switchboard operator, thankfully you were behind the lines because they needed you for communication. One night, you were at a home in Germany working the switchboard. Would you tell us a little bit about what the switchboard operator did and about that specific
I will,
night?
but I want to tell you first about being a switchboard operator. I don't know how that happened to me, but one day I was told I was going to be a switchboard operator. The switchboards that were used had 36 connections, They were about a yard high and a yard wide. If you were a switchboard operator, you would work where you was located, and they picked places that were as safe as they could possibly find for the cause communications were very, very important. So I was told one day I was a switchboard operator. The way that worked is the switchboards, first of all, were put as far back as they could possibly be because communications was so important. So to work the switchboard, it took 3 people. There was and this is inside wherever you was, happened to be at that time. The switchboard was run by a sergeant and 2 privates. You would work 2 hours. Other 2 men worked 1 hour each. The sergeant worked 2 hours, 1 man 1 hour, the other man 1 hour. That's the way it worked every day. So the day Sis is talking about was at the Battle of the Bulge, during the Battle of the Bulge. And I was on the switchboard that night. It was, when this happened, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. The Battle of the Bulge was going on, and our location was just out of the city of Docking. And the Timberwolves a few weeks before had captured Docking, and it was a very important location for the Battle of the Bulge because that's where the Battle of the Bulge was coming and started, was at that point. So it was about 2 o'clock. Nobody else was up but me. I got a call from the switchboard that said that German scouts had been reported being in my section, and for me to be sure to watch out for them. So that's fine. Nobody else, it was freezing weather, nobody else was up in the house, just me. When I got that message, I put on my boots, I picked up my rifle. I had to go around the house and see what was going on. I jumped ahead. We were in a house, and I was the only one awake. Everybody else was sleeping. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. So when I got this call, it wasn't but one thing for me to do. I put on my boots, I got my rifle, and I started walking around to hear what kind of noise had been made. When I got around, the Germans generally had open door units from the ground that you could pull the doors open and go underneath and the women would do cooking and sewing, whatever they needed to do. These doors, by the way, were made out of steel, and if you pull them up, you would pull them up to go inside the building.
Face into the
So
center.
about 2 o'clock in the morning, freezing outside, I'm the only one up. There was a loud noise on this entrance into the basement. It sounded like somebody was trying to open that door and get into the building. So I sat there, nothing else doing. About 10 minutes later, it happened again. So I decided it was time that I'd try to find out what it was. I got my rifle, I put my boots on, I started walking around the house. When I got to the underground doors, I didn't see anything. I pulled them up and I looked underneath and there wasn't any problem, so I went back to bed. The next morning I decided I'd like to know what was making the noise. So I walked around there and I stopped at I opened the doors and I looked underneath again and nothing had happened. So then I looked around and I found out what happened. The weather was freezing. The soldiers sitting in the room on the second floor had put bottles of beer on the windowsill. When the beer froze, it fell and hit that opening door. So that happened twice. And when I saw that, of course, I saw my situation, but I opened the doors again to be sure they worked and nothing, but that's the end of the story. But it was really complicated there when it was happening.
I'm glad there was a little humor. So this is already in the early 1945, and over the next couple months, Germany was losing more and more, and you began to see them surrender and celebrations going on in streets and towns where you were. There was one celebration toward the end of the war that you were on duty, and what happened then?
Well, the war had ended, and my unit was stationed in this town, and I've forgotten the name of it, but the University of Germany College University was in that city, and one unit of the college turned out to be the education unit of the eye doctor, the doctor who discovered the
Contacts.
what kind of
Contacts.
was in that was his office. He had discovered the
Contacts.
camera that was so popular and the best camera there was in the world. But he was also an eye doctor, did a lot of instruction and learning, and he had developed the what kind of eye?
Contacts.
Contacts.
Dad, what were people doing in the street?
Well, let me get to that.
Getting there.
So anyway, you could go see that doctor and he would examine your eyes and make those contacts for you. And I left before mine were ready, but I I got a package one day in Talladega, and they included 3 sets of contacts, and the contacts were not the same size as what they are now, but they were about the size of a quarter. And it was hard to put them on, but he was successful making them anyway. Now, Sis is talking about what happened when the war was over. We were near another town, and I've forgotten the name of it, but everybody was happy. The Germans were happy. The men, the women were all going up and down the street, happy, kissing, everything happening. And they were drinking. All of them were drinking, had bottles of wine. It happened that I was on guard duty in town that night. And people would come by, they'd grab me, they'd give me a kiss, they'd give me a bottle of wine. I was drinking wine the whole time I was in guard duty. And it was a big celebration, as you can imagine. But that's the end of that story.
Well, actually, the rest of that story, from what you told me, is that you drank enough wine that you did not drink wine after that for many years to come.
I found it very hard to drink dark wine, and I just couldn't do it. I finally got to a point that I could take a swallow, but primarily when I drink wine, it's always white wine. So y'all remember that.
So, Dad, as you and I talked, I asked you that before you left for Europe in World War II, what did you know about the concentration camps? Did you know anything about what was being done to the Jewish people and many others? And you told me not really, but could you talk about that a little bit and about after the war, please?
Well, actually, the commanders of the different countries, I think Roosevelt had word of the concentration camps. Churchill knew about it. Stalin knew about it. The general public in Germany probably knew about it because people who worked in the camps lived in those areas. What this is talking about is one day after the war was over, the commander, General Terry Allen of the Timberwolves, driver happened to be John Harbert from Birmingham, and they were driving around to see things that had taken place and what had happened some places when they came across this
Concentration camp.
what do you call it?
Concentration camp.
Concentration camp. They didn't know what it was, but there were thousands of people there who had seen them, people hanging on the walls. They've been digging ditches to bury the blind, the people, the Jewish people, all without clothes, all so thin they could hardly move, didn't have anything to eat. And he watched them. They were digging ditches at that time to put bodies in. Some of them would be digging and fall in. And that was the first contact, I think, that people had actually, people had known the head people of the other countries knew about it. but they found and saw those things going on.
And subsequent to that, either John Harbert or somebody gave Dad photos that he kept for
I
long.
had, somebody gave me, it was a bundle of pictures about this. The bundle was about that big, and there were hundreds of pictures of the concentration camps, so that there was absolute proof of what had happened there. There was no guesswork because those pictures have it. And I brought them home. I gave them to Sissy
To
finally.
Karen, I'm Karen.
Uh,
I'm Karen.
and she came out naturally. To, what's your name? Karen. And she has given it to the hospitality.
Holocaust Education Center.
Okay, that's where they are. And if anybody wants to look at them, they can go down there and they'll give them to you and let you look at them.
So, thank you. So the war was over, and Dad stayed in Europe for a few more months and came home on August the 1st of 1945 with orders that at the end of August, he and his unit would be sent to Japan. So we had the 2 atomic bombs were dropped when he landed, and so he did not have to go to Japan, thankfully. When you landed in America, your parents, Nana and Happy, met you at the train with Uncle Jack, right? Did you recognize Uncle Jack?
Not at the first. Jack was 14 when I got back to the States. When I came back, I was on pass, but they gave me transportation that landed in close to Camp Gordon, I think it was. And we landed on August the 1st, and I had till the end of August to be on vacation before I reported to California.
But wait a minute, did you recognize Uncle Jack?
So when my folks came to pick me up to go home to Talladega for a while, when they got there, Jack opened the door, of course. Mother and Daddy got out of the car, but Jack had grown, I think, 10 inches that time that I was gone. And when I saw him, I didn't even recognize him to begin with. That's what Sissy's referring to.
Yes. All right. So
while I was on vacation, from August 1st to the end of August, the bomb was dropped for the first time about, what was it?
August the 6th. August 6th. And then
August 6th, and then a couple of days later they dropped another one. And when that happened, the Japanese decided it was time to quit. And they had signed the peace agreement, and so that war was over, but I still had to go to California. When I got out there wasn't anything to do, really, but the Army. Is that what you want me to talk about?
I was gonna say Dad was sent to San Luis Obispo in California. And let me summarize for just a minute and then you can tell the last story, okay? So there were, I think, 32 men that had returned from the war that were together in San Luis Obispo, and they were paired up. And what their assignment was to talk to the military, to the men that returned from the war, to teach them or educate them about what had been happening in the United States during the war years. And so you worked for one day and you were off 2 days. Would you tell us who you were paired up with and what you did briefly? Because the dice is on me.
Well, the newspaper published the papers every day, giving the news as Sissy talked about. The Army, in its wisdom, had decided to make teams of 2 people each to go around and talk to the soldiers about what had happened in the war, what to expect when they get home, and how things had changed. As it happened, the 2 people would talk, probably make about 6 or 8 speeches a day, and you were off for 2 days. You worked one day, you were off 2 days. As it happened, somehow, John Harbert and I were put on one team. Neither one of us had ever heard of the other one, but both of us from Birmingham, I guess is the way the man saw that. But anyway, we would talk to about 6 or 8 times when we were working. We work one,
Wait,
we'd
so
talk to that
what'd
many
you do
people,
on your
and then
day off?
we'd be off for 2 days. So John and I, we got to be acquainted, and we just had a time. We went up and down the coast of California. You didn't need passes. Nobody had any control over you. You did what you wanted to. We came. We went to to San Francisco. We went to Los Angeles.
Who did you meet? Who did you meet while y'all were traveling?
Well, one day we had stopped at a little town that had a golf course right on the highway. And we decided we'd play golf. So we went in and the people gave us irons and clubs and gave us balls and told us to go tee up when it came our time. Well, we waited a while and we got on, it came our time. So we were getting ready to tee off, and this little fella came up and said, "Sir, I see there's just 2 of y'all. Would you mind if I played with you?" We said, "No, we're happy to have your company." So he told us his name. It was Simmons. He said, "My name is Simmons. I'm a furniture salesman. I work this area. I work up and down here. My wife travels with me. We lost a son in the paratroopers in the war. And she doesn't like to stay at home, so if I have anybody to play with, she'll stay at the clubhouse and read. If I'm by myself, she'll go with me." So in this case, he played with us. He was about 5.5 feet tall, I guess, a little short fella. He would tee off. His ball would go up, opened up, and just before it started, it'd make a little turn to the left. It was amazing how he could do that. As it happens, he was the championship of his country club at, I think it was Oak Hill Golf Company in San Francisco. But we played with him that day, and it turns out, I told you they had lost a son in the war, and they adopted me and John. And when we were in San Francisco, we'd stay with them. And, we were just like their family. And John and I just had a ball. We were without any control anywhere. We'd go to San Francisco one day, we'd go to LA the next day, back and forth, and just having a good time.
Okay, wait a minute. What, Uncle Jack?
While he was in Germany, he sent a box home to Talladega that had in it a Luger pistol, automatic pistol,
So Uncle
a
Jack is,
German flag, and a dagger. I don't know whatever.
well, I
happened to
have
that
some of that.
stuff.
Uncle Jack is saying that while you were in Germany, you sent home a box with a pistol, a Nazi flag. We have the Nazi flag at the Alabama Holocaust
And a
Education,
dagger.
and a dagger, and you sent stuff home.
Yeah, does he remember?
Do you remember, Uncle Jack wants to know, I didn't ask for questions yet. Uncle Jack wants to know, do you remember sending home the box of stuff from Germany with your pistol and a few other things in it?
I remember having the box. In fact, there was a sword in there that was used, I don't know, by an officer, and I don't know what they did with it, but it wound up in that box. And I gave that box to Jimmy Rotenstreit, and as far as I know, he still has it. And it also had a little pistol that was made in Belgium, and something's happened to that. It wasn't much good. I gave him that too, but I think they've gotten rid of that, although you could ask him if you want to.
So as we're concluding, Dad was talking about the couple, Simmons, that you and John Harbert met. And a few years later, when you and Mom got married and went out west for 5 weeks, you took her to meet them.
I did. We had been so close with them, and they considered John and I as being their sons now. And I wouldn't go out there without taking Sissy by to see them. Sissy and her manner talked with them, and they all got friendly, and they enjoyed Sissy's company. Sissy enjoyed their company, and it wound up that Sissy and I were their children, and they just loved Sissy, and Sissy, you know the way she could be, and they were very, very happy that we stopped. And that was the last time that we saw the Simmonses.
So this, for you to know, is a very nicely, wonderful, condensed version. And Dad, at any time, will be glad to talk to any of you. All you need to do is call him or Harriet or me or any of us, and we'll be glad for you to visit. Dad, before we finish, do you have anything else you want to say? Any parting remarks? Anything about you, about the service, about what should we remember?
Well, I want to thank y'all for listening to this. It's been a pleasure for me to tell you about it. As I remember now, that's about all that I have to talk about, and if any of you want to ask any questions or have stories of your own to talk about, it's my pleasure for you to start now.
Thank you so much. We need one more minute, and one more minute that the Jewish War veterans are going to honor Mr. Held with a very special certificate.
Thank you.
Wait, let me say one thing just a minute. I forgot I was going to say to begin with that Hadass is responsible for this. She put it all together. She did a lot of work, and I want to tell you it's wonderful. And Sissy
Karen.
also has done a lot of work and spent a lot of time with me teaching me how to talk.
Thank you to our shy Karen. You can hold the microphone over so you can speak.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Close.
I'm an expert.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. In 1896, 78 Jewish Civil War veterans met in New York City and formed the Hebrew Union Veterans Association, the precursor of the Jewish War Veterans of America. The JWVI, as is known, is the patriotic voice of American Jewry, and is also America's oldest continuously active veterans organization. Its mission includes combating anti-Semitism and bigotry, preserving the records of patriotic service performed by both men and women of the Jewish faith, and honoring the memories and shield from neglect the graves of heroic Jewish veterans. The Jewish War Veterans presently has an estimated 15,000 members, including the 23 veterans of Post 608 here in Birmingham, Alabama. Will all veterans who are present please rise so we can recognize you? Don't be bad.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will follow you.
Yeah, okay, she's good. Okay, I'm
I'm a
back.
microphone stand.
Very well done. You have a
Thank
tremendous
you.
memory.
Thank you.
And then such a camera. Okay. Okay, Mr. Leonard, okay, ready? Mr. Leonard Held, as a member of the greatest generation, you served honorably during World War II. You are one of the approximate 550 Jewish persons in the USA who served during World War II. Men and women of the Jewish faith comprise 4.23% of the military service members during World War II, whereas they comprised only 3.3% of the general American population. Okay? A clear over-representation. Serving in World War II is a distinguished honor, and we celebrate you for your service. Now, being a centenarian and a World War II veteran has not gone unrecognized by the Jewish war veterans. On behalf of the Jew, and there is a certificate there, I'll read it from what's on the certificate right here, from the National Office of the Jewish War Veterans. And I'll just read verbatim what it actually says. On behalf of the Jewish war veterans of the United States of America, we congratulate you upon reaching a 100th birthday. Actually, I think it's 101. I have to send this back. 101 birthday milestone. Thank you for your service in the U.S. military and your devoted service in World War II on behalf of Jewish War Veteran Post 608. Your commitment and unwavering service has brought great credit upon yourself, the Jewish war veterans, and your country. Signed, Barry Lashinsky, Colonel, U.S. Army, retired. He serves now as the National Commander of the Jewish War Veterans. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, let me say one thing, honey. I'm happy that I was able to do that. And even more so, I'm happy to be here to have talked with you. I appreciate the attention you gave me.